Hello, model citizens. This episode is part 5 of my video series, Scenery Experiments. In the previous episode from this series, we started talking about the order of operations. In today's video, I'm going to expand on that conversation and go into more details on what changes I would like to make in the future. Welcome to Humanity Junction, where the city intersects with humans. I am focusing on where I went completely wrong in this episode. It is my intention that in another 5 years, I will be able to look back on this T-Trak module and see how my skills have improved and that my experiences have enabled me to take my visions and turn them into reality. I wanted to glue down all of the track on my T-Trak module because I once saw a piece of track get pulled off a module when trying to separate two modules during a club meeting. I did not trust that the small screws into the plastic mounting holes on the bottom of the track would keep the tracks secure. I thought that gluing down the tracks would be a good option to prevent track damage during module separation. What I did not do was test everything thoroughly before permanently attaching the track to the module with glue, especially the turnout. The Kato No. 4 turnout, and possibly other Kato turnouts, need to have the two power routing screws on the bottom of the turnout moved so that there is not a short during DCC operations. I did not have the experience to know this about Kato turnouts with DCC, and I did not do thorough testing and verify that everything was working before I initially glued down and soldered in the turnout. I also did not connect the DCC decoder to the Kato turnout prior to gluing. I did get lucky that I was able to get it to work, but I should have also tested that functionality of the switch motor before gluing. Due to needing to pull up the turnout to adjust the power routing screws to work with DCC, as well as possibly getting something inside of the switch mechanism, the turnout does not currently work consistently. Being a Kato turnout, the mechanism is actually inside the turnout, so I do not have easy access to clean it, and I do not want to try to remove the turnout again. In the future, I need to confirm that the track is wired correctly and that everything is operational before gluing down the track, as this would have saved me a lot of trouble later. Test thoroughly before gluing down any track. I did not use an NMRA standards gauge during the planning and build process of this module. I originally thought that the gauge was just an overpriced piece of metal and I did not understand its value. Being a beginner modeler that is still learning what everything looks like in N-scale, the gauge would have been a very valuable tool for me to use in the planning and building process. I wanted the trees on the layout to be as close as possible to the tracks, but I did not test my clearances before gluing in any of the trees. I significantly had underestimated the needed clearances. If I had used the NMRA gauge during planning, or even just before gluing in the trees, I would have caught this issue a lot sooner in the build process. I would recommend getting and using an NMRA gauge. If you do not want to purchase the metal gauge, you can print out the gauge and attach it to a piece of thick cardboard or foam core. While a printed gauge would not work well for track and wheel width testing, it will work as a clearance gauge. I permanently attached my structures to the module very early in the build process. I had never seen someone attach their structures to their layouts prior to painting, weathering, and adding decals to their structures, nor had I seen anyone attach the structures to the layout before adding the ground cover or other smaller scenery elements, so I'm not really sure why I did it. I had this brilliant idea that if I cut holes in the modules under where the structures were going to be placed, that I would still have access to the structure interiors so that I can install the structures first and add the scenery in around them. The two main issues that I had with attaching the structures is that I kept breaking the more fragile elements, and I also had a lot of access issues to completing the detail work. As for damage, I broke the front station platform 4 times and the back station platform once. For the first repair, I completely replaced all of the broken uprights. This was a very difficult process as I had already run all the wires for the lighting up the uprights. The rest of the times, I just glued the uprights back together as best as I could and repainted them as needed. I could have saved myself a lot of repairs if I would have installed the station platforms near the end of the build. When modeling small parts, they're not really durable, so you have to come up with ways to protect the delicate parts. I ended up adding pieces of wood on the sides of the module, but a better method would have been just not installing the platforms in the first place. In regards to my access issues, there are a lot of different elements to this. With the structures attached, I needed to move the entire module around while working on the structures and not just the structures themselves. Attaching the structures also made it very difficult to do any weathering, attach decals, and complete other finishing details like the interiors or the lighting. It also limited my ability to add ground cover and other scenic details. All of the structures are installed on bases that I made out of foam core. On future builds, I will attach the bases first, then complete the rest of the scenery on the module, then attach the structure to the bases. Another thing that I would like to try, especially since these are T-Trak modules and are portable, is to use small magnets to attach the structures. I've seen this method used a lot by tabletop gamers who embed small magnets into their scenery so that they can create different configurations. While I'm not planning on creating different configurations for my next build, I'm going to look into how I can use these magnets to hold down the structures. I think this will be better than using glue or adhesives so that they could always be removed for repairs or modifications. I had some issues getting static grass into the areas that I wanted on the module, and the areas that I did add grass did not come out as I envisioned. Installing the static grass before attaching the structures would have helped out my access issue, but it would not have changed my ability to turn what I imagined it should look like into what it ended up looking like. I did not do any tests with the static grass before applying it directly to the module. I thought I knew what I would get based on using the static grass applicator once before, but this one time was over 6 months ago. If I just would have tested out the process that I planned to implement, I could have made adjustments before the actual application. Static grass has a huge impact on the look of the scene you are trying to create, and I would have benefited greatly from doing some very simple tests. Also, make sure to completely remove any errant static grass as it clings to everything. I had a very hard time removing it. Even after brushing and vacuuming the grass, I still found it in areas that I did not expect. Living in New York City, there's not a lot of open space. But when building a model, you need to consider the open space just as much as the space that you are planning for your track or structures. When I was learning to play music, one of the things I was taught is that the rests or the silence were just as important as the notes you were playing. I think this concept also applies well with model railroading, where the empty space is just as important as where you are placing the structures, trees, or any other details on the layout. One major item missing from my first module is a road. When planning the layout, it was only going to be possible to either have a spur that I could use as a programming track or a road. I decided that my townspeople would walk everywhere and take the train so that I could have a programming track. Another time that I considered space was when adding the trees. I took into account the viewing angles that I wanted and placed the trees accordingly. Blocking the view from one angle but leaving open space in another helps to tell the story which you want to convey. I really like working with viewing angles and open versus closed spacing, and in future builds I will spend more time planning this into my layout from the beginning. I primarily use the images in my head when planning, building, and adding the finishing elements to my module. I did not locate any specific images to reference that would have helped guide my decisions along the way. Also, there are a lot of great YouTube videos that provide hours of education on how to complete every part of the model railroading build process. There definitely needs to be a balance between spending all of your time researching locations and learning new techniques versus learning as you go. I know that I am more of a learn as you go type of person. I do like to hold things in my hands and see what is possible with them. But I also could have found a better balance between the two on this build. Specifically, I could have found more images to guide my design of the small town scene, as well as learning techniques and skills to build the module to look more like the reference photos. Could I have learned more before starting to experiment? Is it better to learn from research or learning from doing? How do we find a balance? This is something that I will continue to explore. Don't shy away from the difficult parts, as they can be the most rewarding to complete. Take your time. If you need to take a break, do so. Not every moment is going to be enjoyable, but if you keep the big picture alive, you will have fond memories of the process. I will end this video from a statement made by one of our wise men of model railroading. Sometimes what you learn in one situation does not apply to others. This was said by Captain Arduino, also known as Tom's Trains and Things. Keep playing and stay young at heart. Thank you for watching. Please leave any comments or questions below, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe and select the bell icon to receive notifications. Thanks again, and have a great day. I significantly underestimated the needed clearances. The needed clearances. All of the structures are installed on bases that I made out of foam core. On future build, come on, Heath, you can do this. In regards to minimizing my access, I had some issues getting... Not perfect, but it works. Whew, baby. Let's stop. Living in New York City, there's not a lot of open